The arrhythmia wasn't a tragedy. It was a tactical summons, a whispered invitation delivered on a wave of failing biology. Across the suffocating kaleidoscopic chaos of Istanbul's Grand Bazaar, Ari Levinson watched the man known as the Alchemist falter. The midday sun, filtered through the high, grimy glass of the arched ceiling, cast the scene in a jaundiced, dreamlike light, making the river of humanity flow like currents of molten gold and shadow. Fadi al-Khatib, a specter Ari had hunted for 1,095 days, a ghost whose existence was confirmed only by the craters and casualty lists he left in his wake, suddenly broke stride. One hand, surprisingly delicate for a man whose work was measured in body counts, flew to the breast pocket of his impeccably tailored linen jacket, clutching at the source of his sudden, internal betrayal. Al-Khatib's face, a visage Ari had studied for 3 years in grainy surveillance stills and interpolated intelligence photos, usually a mask of detached intellectual cruelty, was now a canvas of slack-jawed panic. His eyes, the color of cold slate, were wide with a primal terror that no external threat had ever managed to provoke. He stumbled against a stall overflowing with brightly colored ceramics, sending a stack of hand-painted bowls crashing to the ancient stone floor. The sharp, percussive sound of their shattering was instantly swallowed by the bazaar's relentless din. The roar of 100 haggling merchants, the metallic clang of a coppersmith's hammer, the cloying sweetness of apple tea mingling with the sharp tang of curing leather, and the acrid smoke of cheap, loosely rolled Turkish cigarettes. The midday adhan, the call to prayer, had just begun its haunting, cascading echo from the 6 minarets of the distant blue mosque. The sound, a constant reminder of how far Ari was from the familiar salt-laced air and brusque energy of Tel Aviv, usually set his teeth on edge. It was the ambient noise of exile, of the hunt. But today, it was the overture to an opportunity so rare, so exquisitely timed. It felt like a celestial alignment. It was the soundtrack to a kill switch. Fadi al-Khatib, the alchemist, was having a heart attack. This was the architect of the Paris cafe bombing that had vaporized 17 people, leaving behind only a child's mangled tricycle as its iconic scar. Ari remembered the intelligence photos, the way the twisted red metal had stood out against the gray, pulverized concrete. This was the strategist behind the London underground attack that had turned a morning commute into a subterranean charnel house, using a sophisticated barometric trigger to detonate as the train plunged between stations, maximizing the pressure wave and the ensuing panic. And now, the great and terrible alchemist, a man who moved through the world with the untouchable confidence of a minor god, was being brought down not by a drone strike or a keyed-on operator's bullet, but by a tiny, malfunctioning electrical node in his own sinoatrial junction. His 2 bodyguards, thick-necked brutes with the dead-eyed watchfulness of men who had seen and done terrible things, moved to form a protective circle. One, a pale Chechen with scarred knuckles and a poorly healed knife wound tracing his jawline, barked into a wrist-mounted microphone, while the other, a broader, darker man of indeterminate origin, scanned the teeming archways. Their eyes, frantic and predatory, darted through the river of tourists, merchants, and locals, scanning for a sniper in the latticed windows, an assassin in the crowd, a threat they could see and shoot. The telltale bulges of their Heckler & Koch MP7s were obvious under their ill-fitting suits to a man like Ari, who knew exactly what to look for. They were looking for the enemy, completely blind to the fact that the enemy was already inside the citadel, waging a microscopic war within their principal's own body. Ari, a man who had mastered the art of being invisible in plain sight, simply adjusted the strap on the cheap, DSLR camera slung around his neck and melted back into the flow of the crowd. He became just another tourist, overwhelmed by the sensory assault, his face a mask of mild curiosity. The cold wind that funneled through the bazaar's ancient stone corridors carried the scent of cumin, ground coffee, and 1,000 years of commerce. His hand moved casually to his ear, a subtle press to activate the subvocal microphone in his comms unit, a device no bigger than a grain of rice tucked deep in his auditory canal. "Yael, are you seeing this?" he murmured in crisp, unaccented Hebrew, his voice a calm island in the storm of adrenaline surging through his veins. Status on Target Alpha. Miles away, in a nondescript apartment with a commanding view of the Bosphorus Strait, where colossal tankers slid silently past the windows like steel mountains adrift. Yael Cohen didn't need to answer in the affirmative. The air in her room was cool and sterile, smelling of ozone and the bitter dregs of day-old coffee. Her fingers, long and elegant, were already a blur across the triple monitor setup that was her window onto the world. "Visual confirmed, Ari," she replied, her voice a dispassionate hum in his ear, stripped of all emotion by training and temperament. "I have him on the dome camera at the Bayezid Gate entrance. He's going down. Medics en route. Local response time is 4 minutes, best case. We have a window." The Alchemist was a ghost. For years, he had been Mossad's most frustrating target. He had no permanent address, no known family that hadn't disowned him decades ago, no digital footprint that wasn't a deliberate misdirection. He moved through the world like a phantom, his only signature the elegant, horrifyingly sophisticated explosive devices he designed. They'd tried everything. Drone strikes were impossible. He never stayed in one place long enough and always surrounded himself with civilians. A kinetic operation, a bullet from a Caesarea Department Kaidan team, was deemed too high risk. He was always in public, always flanked. Killing him would mean killing dozens of innocent people, turning a necessary evil into a public relations catastrophe that would burn them for a decade. But 18 months ago, a gift had fallen from the heavens, or whatever secular equivalent the Mossad's high command paid homage to. A source, a disgruntled courier in Al-Khatib's network, had passed on a single, priceless piece of intelligence in a dead drop in Vienna, just hours before he was found floating in the Danube, his lungs full of river water and his pockets full of stones. The Alchemist had a weakness, not for women or money or ideology, but for his own mortality. He had a congenital heart defect, a ticking clock in his chest, managed by a state-of-the-art pacemaker. The Medtronic Azure X TDR-MRI. A marvel of medical engineering, capable of wireless telemetry, self-diagnosis, and safe operation within an MRI machine. And, as of this moment, Fadi Al-Khatib's Achilles heel. The piercing European-style wail of a Turkish ambulance sliced through the bazaar's cacophony. The bodyguards, relieved to have a tangible course of action, cleared a path, shouting in guttural Turkish, half carrying their gasping, sweating boss towards the light of the street. Ari shadowed them, keeping a moving screen of at least a dozen people between himself and their frantic procession. He was a tourist with a camera, another face in the crowd, utterly forgettable. He watched them load Al-Khatib into the ambulance, the hulking Chechen climbing in with him, his hand never leaving the grip of his weapon. The doors slammed shut. The siren screamed, and the vehicle lurched into the city's sclerotic traffic. "They're heading for the American hospital in Nishantashu," Yael's voice reported, calm and precise. "Traffic is heavy. ETA 17 minutes. We have the schematics. We have the personnel files from our long-term penetration. But we don't have the package, Ari." "Get me Gideon," Ari said, his pace quickening as he navigated the labyrinthine alleys, his feet sure on the slick, ancient stones. He was heading for the parked scooter that was his only transport, a key to navigating a city permanently gridlocked. The operation is green. Tell him. Tell him the heart is willing. The call to Gideon, the deputy director of Mossad and head of the Caesarea department, was a staccato burst of information, stripped of all but the essential facts. It took place as Ari weaved his Vespa through Istanbul's notoriously suicidal traffic. The horn a constant, useless appendage against a backdrop of blaring horns and shouted curses. Gideon's voice, a gravelly rasp cultivated by a lifetime of sleepless nights and unfiltered Gauloise's cigarettes, was a familiar anchor in the storm. Ari could almost smell the stale smoke and old paper that permeated Gideon's third-floor office in Tel Aviv. "He's stable?" Gideon asked, the question sharp, cutting through the static of the open line. "For now. They'll have him in the cardiac unit within the hour. The Turks are good. They'll want to interrogate the pacemaker, check its logs. Maybe even replace the battery if it's a simple power failure. That's our door, Gideon. It's the only one we'll ever get." A pause on the other end of the line. Ari swerved to avoid a taxi that had cut him off without warning, his knuckles white on the handlebars. He could picture the man in Tel Aviv, hunched over his desk, one hand rubbing his tired eyes, the other holding the secure phone, the weight of 100 past operations etched into the lines on his face. "The package is not ready, Ari. I just spoke to Nava. She says she needs another week to perfect the power cell mimicry. The voltage drop has to be perfect, a logarithmic decay curve. If his device detects a non-standard power source, even a flatline voltage, it will send a wireless alert to a pre-programmed satellite phone. His network will know. The asset will be burned before he even leaves the country." "We don't have a week," Ari stated flatly, banking hard around a tram, the metallic screech of its wheels a jarring counterpoint to his own focused calm. "We have maybe 24 hours, B. This is the only door that will ever open. He'll be vulnerable, sedated, hooked up to machines that will mask our intrusion. He'll be separated from his full security detail. We will never get another chance like this. Never." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy with the weight of calculation. Gideon was weighing the lives already lost, the hundreds killed by the Alchemist's ingenuity, against the staggering risks of a hastily prepared, almost science fiction operation. He was weighing the potential for catastrophic failure, the international incident that would erupt if Mossad was caught performing what amounted to a medical assassination on Turkish soil. "You need the serial number," Gideon said finally, the decision made. The die cast. Nava can't calibrate the package's handshake protocol without the device-specific identifier. It's a 16-character alphanumeric key. Without it, the pacemaker will reject the new power source as a foreign body. "Get me the serial number, Ari." The rest we will improvise. The mission, codenamed Heartstopper, was now fully engaged. It was a plan so audacious, so technically complex, that it had lived in the realm of theory for over a year, a file marked with the highest classification. The concept was deceptively simple. Replace the lithium-ion battery of Al-Khatib's pacemaker with a custom-built device. This new device, Nava's creation, would have two functions. First, it would need to perfectly replicate the power output, voltage decay, and data transmission protocols of the original Medtronic battery, fooling the pacemaker's internal diagnostics and any external scanners. It had to be, for all intents and purposes, a functioning battery. Its second function was more direct. Encased within its biocompatible ceramic housing, nestled beside a microcapacitor and the custom chipset, would be 3 grams of R9. a highly stable military-grade polymer-bonded explosive developed for micromunitions. It was just enough to rupture the aorta and shred the heart muscle from the inside out. The detonation would be triggered remotely by a multi-part, encrypted radio frequency burst transmitted on the 402 to 405 MHz med radio band, a signal that could be sent from anywhere in the world. The result would look like a massive, catastrophic myocardial infarction. No shrapnel, no blast residue outside the body cavity. An act of God, delivered by satellite. But to build this Trojan horse, Nava, the 28-year-old prodigy in Mossad's technology division, needed the pacemaker's unique serial number. It was the key to the entire kingdom. The American hospital was a fortress of modern medicine, a gleaming tower of glass and steel. Ari and Yael's team, a 4-person unit known as a Bayet, had been preparing for this contingency for months. While Ari had been on the street, the other 2 members, David and Lena, were already in motion. David, a master of disguise and infiltration with a background in theater, was walking into the hospital's administrative wing, his forged ID identifying him as Dr. Kenan Saral from the Turkish Ministry of Health, on a surprise audit of digital records compliance. His suit was perfect, his mannerisms a carefully rehearsed blend of bureaucratic boredom and authority. Lena, a signals intelligence expert who could pull data out of thin air, was parked in a florist's van across the street, the cloying scent of wilting carnations masking the hot, metallic smell of her electronics. Her equipment was powerful enough to peel back the hospital's digital security layers one by one, sniffing their Wi-Fi, mapping their internal networks. Ari's job was physical access. In a grimy public restroom a block away, smelling of bleach and despair, he transformed. The tourist clothes and camera were stashed in a gym bag. He emerged in crisp blue scrubs, a hospital ID for a doctor. Altan, a visiting cardiologist from Ankara, clipped to his breast pocket. He walked with a purpose that deflected suspicion, his face a mask of professional concern. He navigated the polished corridors, the antiseptic smell a sharp contrast to the bazaar, and made his way to the cardiac catheterization lab's observation deck. Below him, through a wide pane of tempered glass, he saw him. Fadi Al-Khatib was unconscious on a gurney, a web of wires and tubes connecting him to a symphony of beeping machines. The Turkish cardiology team, efficient and focused, was working on him. Yael's voice came through his earpiece, a whisper in the quiet observation room. His primary bodyguard, the Chechen, is in the waiting room, trying to look inconspicuous and failing miserably. The other is patrolling the corridor outside the ICU. David is in records, but the pacemaker data isn't centralized. It's stored locally on the attending physician's tablet. The file will be with the attending, Ari murmured back, his eyes scanning the room below. The chief cardiologist, a man with silver hair and an air of immense competence, was holding a Medtronic-branded tablet, a digital wand used to communicate with the pacemaker. He was downloading the device's diagnostic data. That tablet was the prize. "Lena, can you get into that tablet?" Ari asked, his voice low. "Negative," came Lena's clipped reply from the van. "It's on a closed-loop, short-range Bluetooth 5.0 mesh network for medical device security. It's designed to be unhackable from a distance. I can't touch it from here. You need to be within 3 feet of it." Ari's eyes narrowed. The cardiologist set the tablet down on a stainless steel cart not 10 feet from the door to the lab. Getting in there was impossible. But maybe he didn't have to. He watched as a junior nurse, looking flustered, was sent out of the lab to fetch a specific stent. She pushed the door open and hurried down the hall. The door began to swing shut, its hydraulic arm closing it with agonizing slowness. It was now or never. Ari walked out of the observation room and strode towards the lab door. He pulled out his personal phone, pretending to be in a heated conversation. "No, the tricuspid valve is the priority. I don't care what the echo says. I need to see the angiogram myself," he said loudly in perfect academic Turkish, his voice ringing with authority. He timed his approach perfectly. Just as the door was about to click shut, he stuck his foot in the opening, holding it ajar, his back to the room, still arguing on the phone. He couldn't see inside, but his other hand was working. In his palm was a device the size of a credit card, thin and flexible. A data skimmer designed by Nava herself. He snaked his hand around the door jamb, extending his arm towards the cart he had seen through the window. His fingers brushed against the cold steel. He swept his hand across its surface, praying he was making contact with the tablet. The skimmer needed only a single second of proximity to clone the device's short-range broadcast signature and MAC address. "Fine, I'm coming down now," he barked into the phone and pulled his foot back. The door clicked shut. He walked away, not looking back, his heart hammering against his ribs. He didn't break his stride until he was in a deserted stairwell, the smell of dust and disinfectant thick in the air. "Lena, did you get it?" he breathed, leaning against the cool concrete wall. The silence stretched for 3, 4, 5 seconds, an eternity in which Ari imagined every possible failure. Then, her voice, tight with triumph. "I'm in. It's a river of data. Pacemaker logs, battery life, patient history, and the serial number. Sending it to Nava now. Stand by, Ari. The package is being baked." Phase 1 was complete. Now, the impossible began. Back in Glilo Junction, Mossad's headquarters north of Tel Aviv, in a subterranean lab shielded from any form of electronic eavesdropping, Nava was already at work. She was a legend, a woman in her late 20s with dark, intense eyes, who had been recruited out of the Technion Israel Institute of Technology. She saw the world not in terms of people and nations, but as interconnected systems to be understood and exploited. To her, the human heart was a simple organic pump, and a pacemaker was just a networked computer with a predictable power demand. The serial number from Istanbul appeared on her primary monitor. "Got it," she said to the empty room, her voice the only sound besides the hum of air purifiers and servers. Her challenge was immense. She had to build, from scratch, a device that was a perfect replica of a Medtronic battery, while also being a bomb. She stood before a custom 3D printer that used a ceramic polymer composite, allowing her to replicate the battery casing down to the micron. It would be invisible to X-rays and wouldn't trigger a metal detector. The inside was the problem. The R9 explosive was stable, but the micro-detonator was sensitive. It had to be shielded from the pacemaker's own electrical discharges. More importantly, her custom chipset had to run a constant, flawless simulation. It had to mimic the precise, gradual voltage decay of a real lithium-ion battery over time. Any sudden drops or spikes, and the pacemaker's firmware would flag it as a critical failure. It also had to respond to interrogation from a doctor's wand, presenting a fake but plausible history of power consumption and cardiac events. It was like forging a Rembrandt that also had to keep a man alive, breathing and thinking, until the moment it was ordered to kill him. Nava worked for 17 straight hours, fueled by black coffee and a cold, patriotic fury. She remembered the images from the Paris cafe, the small, mangled tricycle lying on its side amidst the carnage. Her cousin had been on that street, a block away, and had described the sound, a wet, final thump that was nothing like the explosions in movies. That was her fuel. She built two identical devices. One was the live explosive, which she handled with the delicacy of a brain surgeon. The other was an inert, but electronically identical twin. A practice run, a control group of one. The finished product was a small, off-white disc, no bigger than a silver dollar, slightly thicker. It looked mundane, harmless. Nava placed it in a sterile, vacuum-sealed package. A military courier was waiting. The package was flown on a private jet from a military airfield near Tel Aviv to Geneva, Switzerland. Because Fadi al-Khatib, after being stabilized in Istanbul, had done exactly what Mossad's psychological profile predicted he would do. He didn't trust Turkish doctors. He didn't trust anyone. He discharged himself against medical advice and flew his private jet to the one place the super-rich and super-paranoid went for discreet, world-class medical care. A private clinic on the shores of Lake Geneva. The operation had shifted. The new battlefield wasn't a chaotic Istanbul hospital, but a sterile, quiet, and ferociously secure Swiss clinic. And for this, they needed a new kind of asset. They needed a surgeon. Dr. Alara Vance was one of the best cardiothoracic surgeons in Europe. American-born, trained at Johns Hopkins, she had moved to Geneva for the money, the lifestyle, and the quiet precision of Swiss life. She valued control and order. Her life was a well-regulated machine, much like the hearts she operated on. Ari Levinson entered her life not as a man, but as an opportunity. Posing as Julian Croft, a charming representative for a new medical technology firm, he was intelligent, witty, and his proposal was enticing. A multi-million-euro research grant to study the long-term efficacy of a new type of biodegradable arterial stent. It was a perfect cover, allowing him to meet with her several times, to understand her routines, her personality, her vulnerabilities. The vulnerability, when he found it, was buried deep in a cold case file in Maryland. A hit-and-run accident during her residency in Baltimore. A moment of panic on a rain-slicked road, a bad decision that had altered a life. A cyclist had been injured, not seriously, but she had driven away. The case was cold, unsolved, but not forgotten. Mossad's research department, the digital excavators of the Mossad unit, had found it. They met for coffee at a cafe overlooking the lake, the water sparkling under a clear autumn sky, the snowy peak of Mont Blanc a distant, majestic witness. Ari, as Julian, let the conversation drift. And then, with the surgical precision she herself admired, he made his cut. "We value our partners, Doctor," he said, his tone shifting almost imperceptibly from charming to clinical. "We believe in full transparency. We do a thorough background check on everyone we fund. For example, we know about your time in Baltimore, the night of May 14th. A blue Honda Civic. A cyclist named Marcus Thorne." Alara Vance's blood ran cold. The delicate porcelain coffee cup trembled in her hand, rattling against its saucer. The carefully constructed order of her world shattered in an instant. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't," Ari said softly, his eyes full of a strange, almost paternal sympathy that was more terrifying than any threat. "It was a mistake, a moment of fear. Anyone could have done it. But the Baltimore police, with a little anonymous tip, might not see it that way. Neither would the Swiss Medical Board. Reputations are so fragile." She stared at him, her mind a whirlwind of denial and terror. This wasn't about a research grant. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. "I'm a man who works for people who need to solve a very difficult problem," Ari said. And you are the solution. A patient is coming to your clinic, Fadi Al-Khatib. He needs a routine battery replacement for his pacemaker. You are going to perform the procedure, and you are going to use the battery we provide. He slid a small, innocuous-looking photograph across the table. It was the face from the news, the architect of nightmares. He's a monster, Ari said, his voice low and intense. He designs bombs that kill children in cafes. We are giving you a chance to save more lives in one 20-minute procedure than you could in 100 lifetimes of surgery. You will be a hero, a silent hero. No one will ever know. But you will know. Fear warred with a dark, pragmatic corner of her conscience. She was being blackmailed, coerced into violating every oath she had ever taken. But the man in the photograph, she had seen the footage from London, the soot-stained faces of the survivors stumbling from the dark tunnels. What if I say no? She asked, her voice barely audible above the gentle lapping of the lake water. We don't create problems, Doctor, Ari said, his gaze unwavering. We solve them. And right now, you are the solution. If you cease to be the solution, you become part of the problem. And we always solve our problems. The threat, unspoken but absolute, hung in the crisp, clean air between them. Her career, her freedom, her life, all of it was on the table. She looked out at the placid, sun-dappled surface of the lake. Her ordered world was gone forever. What do I have to do? The day of the operation was a masterpiece of clandestine choreography. The package, Nava's deadly creation, arrived at the clinic not through an official channel, but hidden in the false bottom of a crate of sterile surgical catheters, a shipment whose logistics had been subtly manipulated by Lena from her new command post in a rented van down the street. A cleaning crew, Mossad assets from a local Sionim network of Jewish diaspora volunteers, ensured the package was retrieved and placed in a pre-arranged supply closet in the surgical wing. Dr. Vance retrieved it just before scrubbing in, her hands cold and clammy. The small, sterile pouch felt impossibly heavy. Ari's voice was a calm, steady presence in the tiny, custom-molded earpiece she wore. Just follow your routine, Ilara. You are the best at what you do. This is just another procedure. Breathe. Fadi Al-Khatib was wheeled into the operating room. He was conscious but sedated, a smug, arrogant look on his face, even under the haze of drugs. His two bodyguards stood just outside the OR doors, their presence a violation of every hospital protocol, a concession the clinic's administration had been handsomely paid to make. Relax, Doctor, Al-Khatib murmured in English as she prepped the area on his chest. I'm told you're the best. Make sure your hands are steady. A weak heart is better than no soul. Wouldn't you agree? The casual menace in his voice, the philosophical taunt, nearly broke her nerve. Ari's voice cut in, sharp and clear in her ear. He can't hurt you. We are right here. Focus on the machine, not the man. You are a mechanic fixing a broken engine, that is all. She made the incision, a clean, precise cut along the old scar tissue. Her training took over, her hands moving with an economy and grace that had made her famous. She exposed the pacemaker, a small metal lump nestled in the muscle tissue beneath his collarbone. Okay, Ilara, Ari's voice instructed. I'm handing off to Nava. She'll walk you through the swap. Nava's voice, crisp and devoid of emotion, replaced Ari's. Dr. Vance, you will now disconnect the leads. The monitor will show asystole. Do not be alarmed. The patient's heart is being paced externally by the anesthesiologist. You have a 90-second window. Ilara used a torque wrench to unscrew the leads connecting the pacemaker to Al-Khatib's heart. The steady beep of the heart monitor was replaced by an urgent, flat tone. Her own heart felt like it was trying to hammer its way out of her chest. "Leads are disconnected," she reported, her voice tight. "Unscrew the battery housing. It's a quarter-turn counterclockwise," Nava instructed. She removed the old battery. It was warm from his body. She placed it on the sterile tray. Then she picked up the new one, the one from the pouch. It looked identical. The weight, the texture, the small, laser-etched markings. A perfect forgery. "Insert the replacement," Nava commanded. "Seat it firmly. Clockwise, turn to lock it." Her fingers fumbled for a second. The smooth surface of the device felt slick with her sweat. "It's not locking," she hissed into the microphone, panic rising in her throat like bile. "You're nervous," Nava's voice replied, impossibly calm. "The threading is precise to the micron. Apply steady pressure and turn. It will lock." She took a breath, exhaled slowly, did as she was told. A soft, satisfying click echoed in the silent room. It was done. "Reconnect the leads, ventricular first, then atrial." She reattached the wires. The moment the second lead was connected, the flat line on the monitor was replaced by a perfect, steady rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. The sound of a healthy heart, powered by a bomb. "Get the telemetry wand," Nava said. "We need to see the handshake." Alara picked up the wand and passed it over Al-Khatib's chest. On a screen nearby, a stream of data appeared. Battery voltage, 3.2 volts. Estimated lifespan, 11.4 years. Serial number, a perfect match to the data they'd cloned in Istanbul. Nava's mimicry was flawless. "We have a clean signal," Nava said. "It's working. The device is invisible. Now, close him up, Doctor, and secure the original battery. That is your most important task now. Do not let it out of your sight." Alara sutured the incision, her hands moving on autopilot. She had just placed a weapon of mass destruction inside a human being. She had violated every oath she had ever taken. She looked at the face of the man on the table, the monster who killed without remorse, and felt nothing but a hollow, sickening void. Getting the old battery out was its own tense drama. It was classified as a biohazard and had to be disposed of according to strict protocol. But Ari had planned for this. He had coached Alara on how to argue for further analysis, claiming the malfunction that brought Al-Khatib to her table was unusual and warranted a manufacturer's review. She placed the old battery in a special bio-sealed container and, using her authority as head of the department, signed it into her personal custody. That evening, she met one of Ari's team in a multi-story car park. The exchange was silent. The container was passed over. She was given a train ticket to Zurich and a key to a locker at the station. Inside, she would find a new passport, a new identity, and enough bearer bonds to start a new life. "You did a good thing today, Alara," Ari said to her from the shadows of the car park. She just shook her head, tears streaming down her face, and walked away without looking back, disappearing from her old life forever. For 3 weeks, the world continued as normal. Fadi Al-Khatib recovered in his luxury suite, then disappeared, melting back into the shadows of the Syrian borderlands. The Mossad team in Geneva exfiltrated, leaving no trace. Ari returned to Tel Aviv. The waiting began. It was the hardest part of any operation, the gnawing silence. They tracked him through signals intelligence. A whisper on a satellite phone intercepted by Unit 8200. A flash of a known associate's face in a drone feed over Idlib province. They found him in a villa outside Damascus, a new command center where he was gathering his lieutenants. Intelligence from a source on the ground, a source cultivated for years at immense cost. confirmed the worst. The Alchemist was in the final planning stages of his masterpiece. A coordinated attack on 3 major European airports, timed to coincide with the Christmas travel rush. He was using a new binary chemical agent, odorless and invisible, that would bypass all conventional security. The death toll would be in the thousands. The decision was made in a single grim meeting in Gideon's office. There was no debate. Ari sat in the command center, the pit, a room deep beneath the streets of Tel Aviv, bathed in the cool blue light of a dozen screens. The main screen showed a live feed from a high-altitude drone, a grainy, thermographic image of the Syrian villa. Red heat signatures moved around inside. One of them, isolated by the targeting software, was Fadi al-Khatib. A smaller window showed his vital signs, relayed from a listening post in the Golan Heights that was powerful enough to pick up the faint, encrypted telemetry bursts from his pacemaker. His heart rate was a steady 72 beats per minute. "All stations, check in," Gideon's voice commanded over the room's intercom. "Communications green," came one reply. "Signal relay green," said another. "Asset is in position," Ari said, his own voice sounding distant to him. He looked at the steady rhythm on the monitor. A dead man walking. "The trigger is a 3-part cascade," Nava explained from her console, her face illuminated by code. "The first signal is a primer, being sent from a station in Perth, Australia. The second is a confirmation from a submarine in the North Atlantic. The final command, the arming sequence, will come from here. No single point of origin. It will be untraceable." Gideon nodded. "On my mark. Send the first signal." A technician typed a command. A light on the board turned from amber to green. "Signal 1 is away," she said. On the vital signs monitor, nothing changed. The pacemaker was receiving the code, interpreting it not as a threat, but as a routine diagnostic query. It was the first part of the digital key. "Send the second signal," Gideon ordered. Another command was typed. "Signal 2 is away." Still, the heartbeat on the screen remained steady. Beep, beep, beep. The Alchemist was likely having coffee, finalizing his plans for mass murder, completely unaware of the verdict being delivered from halfway around the world. "Ari," Gideon said, his voice soft. "The final command is yours." Ari looked at the screen. He saw the face of a young girl, pulled from the rubble of the Paris cafe, her dress covered in dust and blood. He saw the haunted eyes of a London tube driver who had seen things no man should ever see. He placed his finger on the enter key. "Send it," he said. He pressed the key. For 1 second, nothing happened. The signal, traveling at the speed of light, armed the micro-detonator inside Fadi al-Khatib's chest. The custom chipset sent a final, massive power surge from the capacitor to the trigger. Then, on the vital signs monitor, the steady rhythm vanished. It became a frantic, unreadable scribble of electrical noise, a digital scream, and then a flat line. The time of death was logged to the millisecond. On the drone feed, the red heat signature that was Fadi al-Khatib simply expanded. It bloomed for a fraction of a second, a flash of intense white heat, and then collapsed into a messy, irregular shape. The other heat signatures in the room scattered in panic. There had been no sound, no explosion they could hear. Their leader had just, inexplicably, burst from the inside out. Echo confirmed. The technician at the listening post said, her voice clinical. Vital signs terminated. In the pit, there was no celebration, only a collective, quiet exhalation of breath. The job was done. Gideon put a heavy hand on Ari's shoulder. "Go home, Ari. Get some sleep. Ari didn't go home. He went to a small, quiet bar on the Tel Aviv beachfront and ordered a Macallan 18. He had saved thousands of lives. He had brought a monster to justice. But the victory felt hollow. The methods they had used, the violation of medicine, the coercion of a good woman, had left a stain that whiskey couldn't wash away. His encrypted phone buzzed. It was a message from Nava. Not a report, but a single file attached. An audio analysis. Curious, he put in his earpiece and played it. It was the data from the original battery, the one Dr. Vance had removed from Al-Khatib's chest. Nava, in her obsessive thoroughness, had spent weeks analyzing its firmware, its data logs, its everything. "I found something, Ari," her voice said over the file, tinged with a strange mix of horror and professional admiration. A hidden partition in the firmware, extremely sophisticated. He must have coded it himself. It's a dead man's switch. Ari sat up straight, the whiskey forgotten. What kind of switch? It was keyed to the battery's power cell, Nava explained. If the battery had ever been removed without the proper disarming code, which he alone possessed, or if it had simply died of natural causes, it would have used its final millivolt of power to broadcast a single, high-frequency signal. A go code. Based on the data fragments I could recover, it was linked to at least a dozen sleeper cells here in Europe and the States. Not his big airport attack. Something else. Something already in place. Bombs in schools, in hospitals, marketplaces. It was his final legacy. A parting gift to the world if he was ever killed or captured. The cold dread that washed over Ari was worse than anything he'd felt in the field. He finally understood. The Alchemist wasn't just a bomb maker. He was a grandmaster of a twisted, deadly game of chess, playing 10 moves ahead. "When we swapped the battery, Ari," Nava's voice concluded, "when Dr. Vance took the old one out and put our new one in, we unknowingly disarmed his last resort. Killing him wasn't the real mission. We didn't even know what the real mission was." Ari stared out at the dark waters of the Mediterranean. He thought of Al-Khatib's last words to Dr. Vance. "A weak heart is better than no soul." It wasn't just a taunt. It was a final, chilling message from beyond the grave. Al-Khatib had known his heart was a liability. He had turned his greatest weakness into his ultimate weapon, a shield of mutually assured destruction. He had dared them to make a move, certain they would never discover the true stakes. And they had, by sheer, dumb luck, called his bluff. Ari finished his whiskey, the bitter liquid doing nothing to wash away the taste of a victory that felt terrifyingly like a defeat. They hadn't outsmarted the devil. They had just stumbled, blindly, past the gates of hell he had built for them, and mistaken it for their own brilliance. The war was not over. It was never over. The ghosts of the dead simply made way for the ghosts of the future. And in the silent, dark spaces between heartbeats, the game would always go on.